Hello and welcome to Unfair Fights. Tonight we're doing a smackdown on evolution and this really ridiculous myth of millions and billions of years. And I've got good evidence that carbon-14 shows us that the millions and billions of years is not true for life on Earth. Nathan, welcome. And for those who are watching, if this is your first time watching Unfair Fights, this is my brother Nathan, and we take turns challenging each other on issues related to the age of the Earth and evolution. So, Nathan, what do you want to say about this topic so far?
About carbon-14 dating. I mean, come on. I've been thinking through, like, what are you gonna hit me with this week? And I can think of all of these edge cases. I'm sure there's like one edge case out there or something where it messes up, and yet you're probably excluding millions and millions and millions of other things that all paint a picture that the Earth is older than what? I mean, what are we saying tonight? Are you saying only 6,000 years? Are you saying
I'm
50,000 years?
saying,
You're kind of slippery on this. I mean, how old is the Earth?
well, I think it's less than 10,000 years old. So,
Okay.
but tonight, my view of the age of the Earth is not on trial.
Oh,
Yours is.
yes, it
And from your comments so far, I can tell you are in for a smackdown because you have no idea what's going on with carbon-14 dating.
Well, you
So
you talked to me before, but I wasn't able to research this after you gave the topic. So if I have any friends out there who can save me by presenting some solid scientific evidence about carbon-14, that would be great.
yes, and so we're not experts, so we do welcome expert opinions, and so we're just you guys are welcome to put your comments in the chat, and you can comment on the video later if somebody has a response to this. I would be happy to hear your response. I've linked all of the sources that I used for this information tonight. And so without further ado, let me bring up my slides and just I'm going to try not to be too slow with this. I'm going to give you a brief overview and then we can do detailed later. But so carbon-14 dating is really, this is carbon-14 is produced by cosmic rays in the atmosphere. And, it is a radiogenic form of carbon, and it has a half-life. So it decays at the rate of 5,700 years is the half-life. So basically, anything that has carbon-14 in it is less than 100,000 years old. Okay. Living things take in carbon-14 from the atmosphere until they die. And then once they die, they stop taking in carbon-14. Now, if the millions and billions model of life on Earth is true, there should be no carbon-14 in all of these things. Fossils that are supposed to be 65 million, from the span of 65 million to 350 million years old, that's what the evolutionary proposal is, that for the dates of these fossils are, and yet they are carbon-14 dated at between 22,000 and 39,000 years old. If these are millions of years old, they shouldn't have a bit of carbon-14 left in them. Coal, supposed to be 40 million to 350 million years old, carbon-14 dated at approximately between 40,000 and 60,000 years old. And there's details, we can go over those later. Now, diamonds are supposed to be 1 billion to 3 billion years old, and yet they are carbon-14. They have carbon-14 in them. And so we can go over the details of that later, but it's not just these items. Every carbon-based or carbon-containing material ever tested, okay, contains carbon-14. Now, let me give you a list of these. Carbon-14 found in marble, shell, coral. Remember that coral that's supposed to be millions of years old? Well, guess what? Coral has carbon-14 in it. Graphite, calcite, whale bone that's supposed to be millions of years old. Foraminifera. Okay, I'm probably pronouncing that wrong. Some kind of sea creature. Anthracite, wood, fossil wood, and natural gas. All of these contain carbon-14, including Precambrian limestone. This is limestone that is supposed to be between 500 million and a billion years old, and it has carbon-14 in it. Now, how is it that we have come to test Precambrian limestone with carbon-14 dating if it's not supposed to have any? Well, this is not young Earth creationists doing this. This is the scientists who work on the accelerated mass spectrometer. Why? Because they have been searching for something that they can use as carbon dead to calibrate their machine. Okay. But guess what? They've never found a single substance that they can use to calibrate their machine that is completely carbon dead. So, this really rules out millions and billions of years. Nathan, what's your response?
Okay. Well, all right. So there's a couple things. Number one, if you talk about half-lives, okay, you never reach zero, right? It's how long half of the sample would decay into other products. So you're never going to reach zero exactly, right? And number two, there's probably a limit of detection. Okay, so you get down to a certain number of half-lives, and at that point, you're at the level of precision or whatever where scientists would say, okay, don't use this anymore as a method. So it'd be like if I was taking like grains of sand, and I got to just, I just had a scooper and I was just scooping out sand. Well, at some point, you get so little sand, you're just kind of scraping the bottom of the wood box with your scooper, and you're not getting real results. Okay, so the sensitivity of your instrumentation, and in this case, my sand scooper, how big it is going to determine how well I can use it. Number three, you also have experimental errors. Okay, so when people are doing this, how do you know that the sample hasn't been contaminated? Okay, and then this is the big one. Yes, carbon-14 comes from cosmic rays hitting the atmosphere. I'm trusting you on that, but I think you're right. Okay, so you have these cosmic rays hitting the atmosphere, and those cosmic rays have probably been constant throughout the millions of years for the most part, but maybe they also increased at certain times. Like, do you remember how I said we came into the local bubble a few episodes back? Okay. Do you remember all of the supernovas I was talking about? All of those ancient supernovas affecting bacteria, virus counts and all this stuff? Now, whether or not I was right about that. Anyway, so we have changes of the amount of radiation hitting the atmosphere that could affect things. But more important than all of that is that carbon-14 might also be a decay product of other larger nuclei breaking apart, right? So to me, there's plenty of explanations why you still have a little bit of carbon-14 residing in some of these ancient rocks.
Bravo, Nathan!
Thank you.
Good job. Wow, for not having studied this, I'm seriously impressed with that response. And there's a lot that's true about it. But let me go back to the where you said the half-life, okay? Remember, yeah, your half-life is actually a probability, right, of the decay of, like, how probable is it, because we actually cannot predict when a carbon-14 will decay into a nitrogen-14, but the half-life is like the consistent, we can over, time, the half-life is the probability. But remember, actually, you can't half an atom like that. So the half-life is on the probability, not on the atoms themselves. And there will come a point when every single carbon-14 atom leaves and it's converted. So there is these should be completely carbon dead. So in fact, they, in the literature, they talk about this. They talk about infinite carbon ages. Okay, these are things that are supposed to be completely carbon dead. Okay, and they really still cannot understand why their samples are, they've tried so many ways to you know rule out contamination. Now let's go to contamination last, because I think that's a big topic. But the other one you said was really interesting. You said that there might be a different isotope that decays into carbon-14, which I don't know about that, but I will give you the rebuttals, and one of them involves something similar to that. So, and these are the rebuttals. And by the way, people who are watching, I picked this topic because there is no good answer to this. Okay. And I spent a lot of time this week reading rebuttals to this understanding the young earth creationist literature. And so here are the rebuttals that are given to the material I just presented. One is, they say these samples, and in particular the coal, may be contaminated by microorganisms. The second one is uranium decay. It doesn't itself produce carbon-14, but the energy from its decay, and it is also present in a lot of these samples. So the energy from its decay can stimulate a nitrogen-14 to become carbon-14. So that is a consideration. That's one of the rebuttals. And then the other one that you mentioned, right, is instrument and machine contamination. Now, let me go through and tell you
But
why. Go
we'll
ahead.
hold your horses a little bit. So, if we, like you said, we're doing things in aggregate, right? So we're doing like a proportion of this that's decayed into that. And so if we looked at this on a graph, I would expect there to be, a curve that basically, I don't know what kind of curve you would call it, but it's basically a curve that starts out high and then goes down at a certain rate. And then somewhere off at the very, 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 very end is what you're talking about, right? It's this stuff that's like so close to the baseline that it no longer becomes a good method of dating things. So regardless of whether or not there's a little bit of carbon-14, you can't get to carbon zero. I think what we're missing here is the fact that if you use it for all of the stuff that it's designed for, right? And people were looking at old stuff and they came up with this ingenious method. I mean, who would have thought? Cosmic rays, striking the atmosphere, things breathing it in. And then when you die, you're not breathing it in anymore. That's pretty ingenious for somebody to come up with that. And the fact that it works, you know what I mean? And so, but this is obviously not designed for something that is billions of years old. And you're looking way, way down. Is there one carbon-14 atom left? Is there 10 carbon-14 atoms left? I mean, to me, we're kind of on the back end of what we're really supposed to be talking about. And what I would challenge you is, where did all this carbon-14 come from, and why does it look like this decay if the world is young? Because you said I'm only here to bash the scientific or the
I'll get
old
there.
world. Okay, all right, go ahead.
I'll get there.
All
But
right, well,
first,
get
let
there
me
quick.
deal with these first.
Just kidding.
Touche. Okay. First, let me deal with these rebuttals. All right. Microorganism contamination. Okay. If these microorganisms are eating the coal,
You mean
then
like archaea? Okay, go ahead.
then they would be the same carbon-14 age as the coal. Okay. So if you've got microorganisms down in these deep, deep coal layers, then what are they eating? They're eating the coal. And guess what? That's going to tell you the same age as, the coal itself. So the uranium decay. Now,
Well, what if it's, hold on, one quick one on that. What if it's water they're using? Water. I mean, like it's like there's no carbon in water, but maybe the water has dissolved some carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, and it still has carbon-14 in it. And it drips down into into the coal mine where these bacteria are eating the coal. So if you have if you have a biological process, who knows where they're getting that carbon-14 from? That's what I'm saying. It's like we're talking about a tiny amount probably of carbon-14.
Okay, and you can make these stories for a particular piece of coal or something like this. But what you're going to run into, Nathan, is that you're going to have to make up a story for every single substance ever tested, because
No,
they
no, I
all
don't.
have the carbon-14. How is
Because
that down in the Precambrian limestone? How is the carbon-14 getting down
who
there?
knows? But what I'm saying is that if we're looking again, I go back to the curve. If we're looking at this curve, we're way down at the end of the tail of the curve, way down in the error bars of whatever you're testing. And so to me, it's like, okay, well, there's the carbon atoms here, but it's never, I don't think scientists have ever said, yeah, we want to test billions of years old rock with carbon-14. No, nobody's doing that. Nobody's saying that. Now, maybe they're trying to get to carbon zero, like you're talking about, as some sort of negative control. But that's like a negative control. I don't know. This whole thing seems crazy.
Yeah, well, and now I lost the thread. I forgot what I was going to say. I mean, I totally forgot what your point was. But basically, now I'm just going to go on to my next one, but
Okay.
I will remember it later. But okay, the uranium decay, like exciting the atom, the nitrogen-14 atom. Well, those reactions are too small by 4 orders of magnitude. So this is not a viable rebuttal. It is true that it can happen. Uranium can cause those nitrogen-14 to become carbon-14. So you could say that's a new source of carbon-14. But the reactions are much too small to account for the level. And that brings me back to what I was going to say. You keep talking about these hardly measurable levels. Well, the diamonds, right, are the ones that have the least, and they still measure 25 times higher than the accelerated mass spectrometer's sensitivity can measure. Okay. So we're not talking about a stray atom or two. We're talking about a serious amount of carbon-14 that is registering.
Okay,
And
well, let's talk about the diamonds real quick. So, I don't know that much about diamonds, but I think diamonds can have different colors. and those colors are created by, you know, impurities inside of the lattice of the diamond. And what if it's something that did emit a beta decay or something like that that created that impurity? Well, then you would expect to have some sort of decay products inside of the diamond. But again, we're talking about minuscule amounts here, right? Even if it is measurable, it's still like minuscule amounts.
Okay, we'll get to the diamonds. Now with and I'm going to go there right after I just say this one point. This instrument and machine contamination, this has already been factored in, because every measurement that you do, you remove the standard, the background samples that they use to calibrate the machine. They have a standard background that they have you remove, and in order to date your item. So those are already removed in what I'm about to show you, and we will go back to the diamonds, and I'm going to show you something that's really fascinating about these diamonds. And like I said, the amount, look, that this includes the subtraction of the standard background of 0.08 PMC. Okay.
What tiny amount is PMC?
Well, we are talking about like
pico. Is that
no,
pico?
It's something like pre-modern carbon or something like that. It stands for something like pre-modern carbon. Okay.
Okay. So we're talking about a picomolar of normal carbon. Look how many zeros you have there.
Okay, are you challenging the whole system? Are you challenging the AMS system? If you're challenging the accelerated mass spectrometer, then what I'm telling you is the amounts that are listed here. Yeah,
I'm just trying to understand what I'm looking at. So you've got 0.0005 picomolars.
It is not picomolars, percent modern carbon.
Okay, percent modern carbon. Okay, so modern carbon is if I'm still living. Is that correct?
This is the calculation that they do. Okay, they do a calculation to account for what you were saying earlier. Remember how you were saying there's different fluctuations? That's actually true. And I'm going to get into that more before we end this to show why these dates are not a problem.
I just want to understand how little carbon-14 we're talking about. So
yeah, it's a little.
What is the amount? The devil's in the details. How much carbon-14 do I have as a living creature right now? How much percentage of my carbon is it?
It's very low.
Okay.
Okay.
Let's say it's 100.
But it's definitely more than this.
And let's say 1,000.
You have much higher. I don't.
Okay.
No.
Well, I can't be too much because.
Okay, hold on. Yeah. Let me answer the question, Nathan. Okay. Is your computer cutting out because you're interrupting me?
Okay, sorry.
I believe that in today, it's about 1 carbon-14 atom for every trillion atoms in your body. Okay.
1 in a trillion.
So these are very small. Yeah, but like, okay. if you really have a problem with the smallness, then what you're not arguing with me. You're arguing with the entire accelerated mass spectrometer and all the methods of carbon-14.
No. I'm scientists. What is the age that scientists say is a valid range for using carbon dating?
Okay, it depends on the where it is and what they use. Okay, so they say it can be stop being accurate at 50,000 years.
Okay, 50,000 years.
Okay, to above. Some will say 60, some will say 70. So it really depends. It depends on the type of material. It depends on a lot of.
And it's a half-life of basically 5,000.
Yes, 5,700.
5,000 years.
The half-life.
Okay. So at 55,000 years old, we would expect to only see half of the carbon-14 that we see at 50,000.
Well, I'm not good at math, so you'll have to figure that one out.
Okay, so at 60,000 it would be half again, 65,000. What I'm saying is that you're already starting with 1 in a trillion, right?
Yeah,
And so then you have to have a very sensitive instrument to get a good date on that, I'm sure. And then
Nathan,
every 5,000 years that you go past what they recommend, you're dealing with half again as much carbon-14.
yes, Nathan, but if you want to, like I said, right now, you're not challenging what I'm saying. You're
Yes,
only challenging the accelerated mass spectrometer. So if you're saying I don't accept any of this because these
no,
amounts are too small, then fine.
yes,
Then
yes.
that's
I am
fine.
challenging that because that's what the scientists are saying. They're saying don't use this method for dating things that are older than this because it's
And
not the correct
I'm not,
method.
but they will agree that these items should be carbon dead. That's why
They,
they Nathan,
assuming that the carbon-14 came from the atmosphere, theoretically, yes, it should be carbon dead. But you've already given me, and I gave you a bunch of examples of where something could come from. It could be muons passing through the Earth and hitting something. I mean, even when they go down into the deepest cave, right? There are still particles, neutrinos, and other things passing through all the time. We may not
so
know
you're
where.
saying this method doesn't work at all.
I'm saying this method doesn't work for things that old because there are other ways that these carbon-14s could be created. And there might be ways that it's created that we don't even understand yet because
Okay.
that's particle physics. If you're talking about 0.110005, 1, 2, 3, 4 decimal places. It's just like if
And
it's
that's
not.
what
If
I'm
it, yeah, go ahead.
No, I'm just gonna sit back and let you until you're finished because you're arguing on and on about the same point.
Because
And
you've never addressed my concern that what you're talking about is something that wasn't meant to be used with carbon dating.
it wasn't meant to be used because it's assumed in the mythology that you believe that these things are millions of years old. But we are finding that they have considerable amounts of carbon-14. It may be small in your eyes, but
Considerable.
you're
Sorry.
you're interrupting me again. And I've interrupted you quite a few times here, but I'm getting to like where this is like getting not feasible. So look, this is the sensitivity level of the accelerated mass spectrometer. That's the smallness that it can measure in the atoms. Okay. Now, these diamonds have 25 times more carbon-14 than that sensitivity allows. I mean, it's much more. So it may seem small to you, but it's
Okay.
a measurable amount that should not be there. Now, here's another problem. These diamonds, they look at where they came from in where did we put on the wrong one? Okay, no, wait, sorry, that's the coal. Never mind. This is my coal argument. Because the coal samples, they don't, if we're dating by the age, the coal samples are in the wrong order. If you're saying this one is older, well, guess what? They don't follow in the right order with the amount of carbon-14 that they have in them. But anyway, they shouldn't have any because they're millions of years old. But with the diamonds, this is from the young earth creation, but the reason that they got the idea to do it is because of this paper where these guys were trying to use diamonds. They had tried so many other things to get carbon blanks. They decided to try to use diamonds, and they tried to get rid of all the contamination. They did everything they could to make it, and where there would be no carbon-14 contamination from any source, and they still found carbon-14 in their diamonds. This was not young earth creation. This was other researchers that were trying to find a good carbon blank. Now, hold on, let me make this point and then you can jump in. Diamonds are the hardest substance on the earth, Nathan. Diamonds don't allow for all these little activities that you think can contaminate. The reason they even picked the diamonds, they said here, is because they don't expect that anything could possibly contaminate these diamonds with carbon-14. And lo and behold, the diamonds still had carbon-14 after these are supposed to be 1 billion years old. So answer that.
Okay. Well, unfortunately, I don't think you've addressed my concern. So I think we should move on to where you think the carbon-14 came from, not from these little samples, but from the regular samples, the samples that are less than 50,000 years old. How do we get this scale of carbon in a young Earth creation model?
Yeah, well, good. I'm glad you asked because because this is well, okay, let me go off of this so we don't look at that right now. Okay, so and I will go back to that slide later. So if the earth is not billions of years old, then it makes perfect sense that diamonds still have carbon-14. I would expect that diamonds were never a biogenic source of, they were not made biogenically, so they were never part of organisms that were taking in and receiving carbon-14 from the atmosphere.
So they were created by God with carbon-14 radioactivity in them.
Yeah, they were created when the earth was created. There was lots of radioactivity, and those diamonds still have carbon-14 in them. Well, I can't answer that. Why do I have to answer for why certain elements exist?
No, I mean, if he created pure diamonds with no carbon-14 in them, how did they get the carbon-14 in them? The trace amounts.
I didn't say he created them with no carbon-14.
Okay, so he created them with carbon-14 in them.
They had carbon-14 in them in the beginning.
Okay,
that's what I'm saying.
I'm just trying to get
trying
to get all the facts here.
And because whether God intentionally said, "I want this carbon-14 atom in here," I don't know. I don't know what's in God's mind. But what I'm saying is, in the young Earth model, the carbon-14 has been there since creation, and creation was not very long ago. It wasn't as in some of these diamonds are dating at 50,000 or whatever years, and of course that doesn't match the young Earth creation model. So let's talk about some of the problems, one of which you already
wait. Let me. So we've got all these humans out there, or human types, hominids or whatever, and they have different amounts of carbon-14 in them. The young Earth creation person who only believes the Earth is 5,000 years old have different amounts of carbon-14, seeing as carbon-14 decays with a half-life of 5,300 years.
So what's your question?
So if I take two specimens, one that's 10,000 years old and one that's 20,000 years old, and I test them, I would expect to see 1/4 the amount of carbon-14 in the second one, because every 5,000 years, half of the carbon-14 goes away. How does a young Earth creationist take those same two specimens and say, oh, okay, these are both remnants of the flood that happened at the same time, and these people were both breathing before they died gasping in the flood?
That's what I'm about to tell you with this slide.
Okay.
So there are some problems. Of course, the thousands of years, the 55,000 years and other dates that do not match with the young Earth creation model. Of course, I don't agree with those dates. I think the Earth is less than 10,000 years old. So I want to talk about some of the problems that make some of those ages incorrect. And this is well known in the literature. You can pick up, this is not young Earth creation saying that this is, these are well-known problems that any secular person who knows about radiocarbon dating will know this. Changes in carbon-14 levels in the atmosphere. This is absolutely known. We know that carbon level 14 levels change all the time, and that it's very hard to track in the past. And my proposal as a young earth creationist are that the earth's the reason that there was significantly less carbon 14 in the beginning is because the earth's magnetic field was stronger, and that aligns with our observations of the earth's magnetic field, that it is decaying. And so, this makes sense that these ages, because the carbon 14 levels actually started much lower in the past, that it would give older ages for things that are actually a lot younger.
Oh, okay. But the problem is, if everybody except the people who are whatever 4,500 years old, I don't know what your chronology is, but everybody who died in the flood would have the exact same carbon-14 level, right?
Well, that brings me to the next one. Different organisms absorb carbon 14 at different rates. And so, and I guess maybe that doesn't answer the humans, but we don't really have pre-flood humans to
Well, what about all the hominid fossils? What are those?
well, nobody's dating those. Actually, I tried to look that up. I would love to see a hominin fossil carbon 14 dated, and I couldn't find anything on that. So if that has been done, I'd love to know about it. And we should do that definitely with Florensis, or I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but the Indonesian one, because those are even bones. Those aren't even fossils. So we should definitely do it on those bones. But I haven't seen anything about carbon 14 dating on that. And if anybody knows of that, please do let me know. So I have no idea what the radiocarbon ages are for those. But different organisms do absorb carbon 14 at different rates. And it's definitely been shown that, organisms in the ocean absorb at a much different rate than organisms that are outside of water. So, and then even down to like a few thousand years ago, radio, carbon 14 dating is not accurate. It's so not accurate that it is calibrated using another problematic dating method called dendrochronology, where they count tree rings and they try to line them up and recreate a history, a kind of piggybacking on different tree rings. And this is extremely just riddled with problems with dating. So
Okay.
it's not a good calibration method. But the stuff I'm saying is not controversial. Go ahead.
Okay. So I want to get back to this young Earth creation theory, because I do expect that you would see a phenomenon, right? You're saying, okay, before the flood, there was a magnetic field that reduced the amounts of carbon-14 in the atmosphere. Okay, or let less be absorbed by humans or all living organisms, right? So, hey, let's just assume that that's true, okay?
Okay.
So then you would have a period before the flood where things had very low carbon-14, and as you said, maybe different things, maybe the way it died, maybe, whatever, maybe there's varying amounts, right? But you're saying that after the flood, there's a tremendous increase in carbon-14. Is that correct?
I'm not saying, I mean, I think there probably was, but I'm
Okay,
saying, but it's hard to know what was going. We don't have data
right.
for. Yeah, we don't know
So,
if the Earth's magnetic field has been decaying at a steady rate. We don't really know.
okay. So if there was a major change in the amount of carbon-14, I'm not talking about like 10% or something like that, but let's say a huge amount between the pre-flood and post-flood. Okay, then what I would expect to see is, if I took a random sampling of things in the ground, that when I was in a flood stage, I would see very low levels, but we're all very similar. And that after the flood stage, for modern things in the last 5,000 years, I would see a tremendous amount. So there'd be a huge gap. There would be a cliff there with carbon-14, but I don't think that that's what they see. I think what they see is that, yes, you have some variation, dendrite or whatever. Again, it's error bars. We're talking about aggregates here. But that overall, you see a slope there or a curve that decays exponentially based on time. Otherwise, this method, it would be shown to be false long ago. So
Well, that would be
I don't see a gap there. I don't think there is a gap.
well, there is actually quite a considerable difference in the level that's in a diamond, for example, and a level that we would see in something that is, dated by history at a few thousand years old.
Yeah, but I mean, yeah, 50. But let's take the last 10,000 years. Okay, if for you anything that's older than the flood is going to have very low levels, right? And I think that that's to try and explain the bottom end of the curve for carbon dating. And
Okay,
then conveniently, we had sort of change in carbon dating, and now we have much higher levels. And that's, I'm guessing, to explain the top end of the curve. But what about the middle? Shouldn't there be a drop off, a steep drop off there somewhere in the middle when the flood occurred? Because that's when the physical changes occurred over 40 days. Before we had low levels of carbon 14, and afterwards we had high levels of carbon 14. So if there was a change in the atmosphere or whatever that drastically changed the carbon-14, then you would see that, wouldn't you?
well, Nathan, again, you're still applying the assumption that the change is rapid because of the flood. I'm not saying that. I'm saying I don't know.
Well,
That could be
that's what
true.
I'm saying. You have to put forward something that we can test. That's empiricism. So what can we
Nathan,
test?
yeah, well, and I actually think what you're suggesting would be a really interesting experiment to do. But of course, young Earth creationists don't get very much funding for their projects,
It
so
seems
it's
like you
very
guys could
difficult
do
to carry
this.
out
You guys
something
could
like
do this.
that. Okay.
You take some stuff that's on the surface. Then you take stuff progressively down into the mud and see, is it a curve like this, or is it a curve like with a big
Okay.
drop off? I think that
It
should be
may
done.
have been done. It may have been done. Okay. And actually, that would be something very interesting to look into and see. Has anybody taken and compared the dates and put them in a order that they would expect? That and is there a change in a drastic change in the amount? But remember, um, this is not. This is actually about your
No, it's not.
worldview.
You are saying this worldview is correct, and I'm saying if there's empirical evidence that it's correct, you should be able to find it. And you have espoused something that I think is testable, but I don't think that's what scientists have found. I think that they have
Okay,
found a
what
curve.
can
Uh,
you supply, like, right now, if we test something that is, from something of a known age, let's say 2,000 years ago, let's say the Dead
well,
Sea Scrolls.
let's say 10,000 years or 5,000 years ago. Let's say 5,000 years ago.
Okay, 5,000 years ago is difficult for, carbon dating anyway. So, I mean, you mean 5,000 years
Okay,
ago as
10,000
far as
years
the
ago.
historical archaeological age that we know about?
I, I don't know what periods they use carbon dating for.
Yeah,
But I
well,
get, but whatever, but the age that they use them for is probably may already exceed what young Earth creationists say about the Earth. And what does that tell you?
Well, I already showed you why those dates are wrong, because they will go and date something at 20,000 years. Okay. There's artifacts that they say are 20,000 years old. But for the reasons I told you, difference in carbon-14 levels, and it, like that may have happened at the flood, but remember, that's not what I'm proposing right now. I said the decay of the magnetic field is what, and we've tracked that it's steadily decaying over time. Maybe something drastic happened at the flood, maybe something drastic didn't happen at the flood. So there may not be this pronounced thing that you're saying there should be, but there could be. If it really is, if the change in carbon-14 was drastic at the time of the flood, which it could be, then we might see that drastic change. But if the Earth's magnetic field is just slowly decaying, then we might not see a drastic change, and that wouldn't rule out.
Well, I mean,
Right.
you make a good point. You make a good point. So I think for me, a lot of what I see in your arguments is you're kind of you're taking something that's kind of a group, a sociology kind of an average, and then using statistics, and then you're poking holes at the edge of the statistics, and the error bars, and this could be a little different and that could be a little different. And what I'm saying is that I think those things can all be true, but it's still there's still a cogent framework that people are trying to use and adapt or whatever. And one of the problems I have with young earth creationism is it only that? Is it only ever going to be poking at there be dragons here on the map? Or are you going to establish a cogent framework of thought that takes into account all the physical evidence? And right now, I don't think that that's happening.
Well, Nathan, like I said, this is you not reading young earth creationist literature, because there are young earth creationists that are making models about
Yeah.
the different kinds and the hydrotectonic
Yes.
plates
Well,
and
extreme. I mean, I would say that's an extreme view, and I would say that it requires extreme evidence to sway me. But I don't think that that exists yet. If it exists, if it will ever exist, you know what I mean?
Yeah, well, that's why I'm busy picking away at the mythology that you've accepted
Okay.
blindly, okay? Because you have to first see, right? Until you see that the millions and billions is wrong, are you ever even going to consider the young earth model? Right now, you think the evidence is so far on your
Yeah, I
side.
think it's very high.
Right. You think it's very high.
Yes.
And that's why my goal is to tear down. That's what I want to do. Okay. That's my
Yeah.
point. Because I think this mythology is harming people. And I don't want people to believe false things about reality. So that's why my goal is to tear this down. Yes, I want people to doubt evolution because it's false. So it is going to, that's what
Okay.
I'm busy doing. I don't care about building up a creation model. Other people can care about that. But right now, I want people to stop believing evolution. And
Okay.
no,
Fair enough.
no, okay. So is there anything else you want to say about this?
I'm unswayed. I guess I'll say that I'm unswayed.
Okay.
I feel like in order to, if you were coming at it from a different angle and you had a hypothesis about young earth creationism and you showed me a dip in the data at this time 5,000 years ago, like, oh, carbon dating on this side, it's showing this steady decay of the magnetic field that we're seeing, correspondence, and oh, here we have a tremendous dip, and this is the flood, and then this period here, this was the time of the mighty men of old, the Nephilim. We think this little blip here is from the Nephilim emitting radiation, or I mean, this is totally different than like going down into the billions of years where it's not supposed to be used and saying, hey, look, there's still some carbon-14 here.
Well, but do you see what you're doing? Because I am showing you that what you're saying is a billion years ago is not a billion years ago. That's what I'm trying to show you.
No, because you haven't. Because the original premise is about carbon-14, that things are breathing, right? And we know that there is a carbon budget there for other decay processes, and other decay processes. Sorry, and there's also a carbon budget there for the unknown. If it's a minuscule amount of carbon-14, then it is possible that there is an unknown process that we don't have yet, and maybe science will discover one. But it's clear to me that scientists are not saying that you should use it for rocks that are billions of years old. They're saying you should use it for this time range, and I don't even know what the time range is.
How do we figure out if a rock is billions of years old?
Well, they might try and come up with other methods.
Okay, and there are other methods, and we'll get to those. Okay.
Okay.
And I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah,
But
but then
right now, we're talking about every single carbon bearing substance that has been tested on Earth has shown to have carbon-14 in it. This should not be true if life and Earth and everything is millions and in the millions and
no,
billions.
no, that's too strong a statement. I think it's fair to say that if everything that has been tested has carbon-14 in it, that there is some physical process that is creating carbon-14, or it's an extremely unlikely event, right? It's like if you're saying it's a 1 in trillion chance that the carbon-14 came from the atmosphere and isn't something this old, then I would say, okay, it's probably from something else.
Wait, if you're saying if there's a 1 in trillion chance that the carbon-14 is what?
That the carbon-14 is from a living thing breathing in carbon-14 atmosphere and dying. Okay. If you're saying there's a 1 in trillion chance that it's this old and it still has a little bit of that carbon left that hasn't decayed, right? Because there is a probability, there's a slight probability that it could still be that. But if it's very, very minuscule, then I would say, okay, it's probably another source of carbon
But
than
it's not
something
that
living and
minuscule,
breathing.
Nathan. It's not that minuscule.
Well,
Aren't you
okay,
looking
well,
at my
whatever it is,
charts?
it
Aren't
seems
you looking
minuscule
at
to
my
me.
look, okay, I want to show you this, and I know your child wants your attention. But yeah, it looks again, there you go with your minuscule
Yeah.
argument,
We're
which
back to
is
the
just
point.
undermined.
Okay.
Now, again, and this is so this is what I wanted to show you before. This is the coal, the levels that they're found in, the Eocene, Cretaceous, and Pennsylvanian, and the dates are all over the place. So as far as, I mean, the amounts are all over the place, which corresponds to dates being all over the place. So, but
Well,
remember,
well, are
you're
we saying
saying
that
these are
coal?
minuscule amounts. These are far above what this instrument can test. And we already removed the standard background. Okay.
Yeah.
Whatever small element that they found, whatever sample they used to calibrate, we already removed that.
Well,
And this is what
yeah.
remains.
So
Okay. It's
let's think
quite a
about all the reasons why you might not want to use carbon dating on coal. Well, if you think that coal is organic organisms that got compressed, right? A bunch of organisms that fell into mud or something like that and died millions of years ago, and it got compressed. And in between time, it may have been covered over with a freshwater or salt ocean, or all of these things. Not to mention the fact that it could be under the ground with radioactive materials, and there's just all kinds of things. I don't think any scientist is saying we should use carbon dating on coal, but maybe there are scientists who say we should.
This is what they tried to use coal as a blank sample. Okay, because it should be carbon-14 dead. It should be, if it's millions of years old, should be carbon-14 dead. So that's one of the things they tried to use. Okay, so they're trying to use it as the clean slate. They're not saying we should date based on it. They're saying we should use it to calibrate our machine because it shouldn't have any carbon-14 in it. But oops, it does. So can't use that one. Let's try to find something else. Oh, let's try to find something else. Can't find anything. Even Precambrian limestone. That's should be a billion years, even diamonds. So can't find anything that doesn't have carbon-14, even the hardest substance on Earth, that it not contaminatable. Okay. So now, do we want to give up here?
Yeah, I don't think we're going to come together on this one. I mean, I feel like the argument is all in the error bars down at the bottom of the curve, and if they can't find a blank carbon-14 with diamond that's a billion years old, it probably means that carbon-14 came from somewhere. It probably didn't come from air that a living creature um, ingested and then died and then somehow got down into the mantle of the earth in order to form a diamond.
No, I didn't say that though. Remember, I said, look, this was creation carbon-14. This was not carbon-14 that was taken in from the atmosphere.
Yes,
So,
but
yeah.
I know, but that's my whole point. My whole point is that carbon-14 is supposed to measure things that were alive, breathing the atmosphere, and died. And obviously, well, not obviously, but I think that a diamond does not count as one of those things because a diamond comes from the mantle of the earth where there's
Right.
lots of radiation, right?
Okay, look. Yes, but let me just I do want to clear this up because no one is saying that the only source of carbon-14 possible is the atmosphere.
Oh, okay. Well, then you just proved my point.
No, I didn't. I already even talked about and said you could get carbon-14 from uranium decay
Exactly.
hitting that. So what I'm saying is, but that doesn't explain why in a diamond, okay, and I have an explanation. It was there at the beginning. Carbon-14 was in the diamond at the beginning.
Okay.
Okay. And so that's my explanation. It didn't come in through, an organism. And diamonds are the hardest substance on earth. So you're not getting the structure. That's why it was picked. They specifically said here, we don't think diamonds can be contaminated. We don't think they can.
And they were wrong.
Okay, or they were wrong, or a different explanation could be these aren't really a billion years old. By the way, there's something here.
Okay.
Oh yeah, and Jamie wants to say, why did they find carbon-14 in dinosaur bones? We didn't talk about this too much. I mentioned the fossils at the beginning, but we find carbon-14 in dinosaur bones. So are those dinosaur bones really, 65 million, 100 million years old? Why are there still carbon-14 there?
Because there's other sources of carbon-14. We live in an energetic universe. Right now, you might get hit by a cosmic ray, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And it's changing one of your atoms into something that's radioactive. It's there's a level of background radiation that's present all the time, and being deep underground does not prevent you from getting hit by a muon or a neutrino. It's unlikely you're going to get hit by a neutrino, but you can still get hit by a neutrino down there.
Dylan, thank you so much for being here. He says he looked it up. This is your unfair friend. I'm seeing that diamonds and coal do not have any carbon-14, but may have trace amounts from contamination. Now, that is the story that is being told. But if you actually read the literature, and these were researchers who said we don't think, even after they did their test and they found the carbon-14, they said, and these were not young earth creationists, okay, and they said we don't think that this could have come from our instruments, from anywhere else. It had to come from inside the diamond. And they said we don't think that a diamond can be contaminated from the outside in. So and then you might get that on a Google search that coal doesn't have carbon-14, but if you actually look at the research, it does. The reason that you might find on a quick Google search that it doesn't have carbon-14 is because of the assumption that coal is millions of years old. But if you actually look at the tests that have been done on coal, you will find that they have carbon-14 in them. So, and I want to put up Dylan's question here, and then we can bring up the next topic for the week. Dylan says, besides carbon dating, what do you say about modern animal fossils appearing in recent layers but different animal fossils that no longer exist appearing in deeper layers. Well, there are a lot of animal fossils that are alive today that do appear in deeper layers. And then there are some that don't appear that we don't have today because they went extinct. So there were lots of animals that have gone extinct. And, even in our lifetimes, animals have gone extinct. So if, we fossilized, if everything in the world got fossilized today, there would be animals that we wouldn't find. And so that's what, in the fossil layers, there's a lot of animals that we won't have alive today. But what we find in the fossil layers is that at every level, you find complete organisms with very complex systems that, don't appear to have gone from a step by step development process that evolution proposes. Actually, it was one of the things that bothered Darwin was the fossil record and how it looked like there were just big leaps. So we find complete and very complex organisms in the fossil record. So
I think that we're a little bit off topic there, but I
okay,
disagree with
yes,
some of
we
the
are.
things you're saying.
Okay, do you want to you can give a quick rebuttal to that if you want.
No, it's okay. But I do
Okay,
want to say, my cam is off because my child is on me. That's why I'm not showing my
that's
cam.
fine. Yeah.
But so for next week, I wanted to talk about petrified wood.
Okay,
Yes.
great.
So, we have in Yellowstone, at a place called Amethyst Ridge, and I think there's like something like 27 different layers of trees there. And petrified wood over time is wood that gets the kind of biological structure of the wood gets replaced by minerals. So I thought it might be an interesting topic for a young Earth creationist to try and explain why do we have all these different minerals, trees, if they seem to have taken a long time, and if there's different layers of them, how did they end up like that?
Yeah, I look forward to that. And remember, unfair friends, I don't get to research this topic now that Nathan has announced it. So I'd love your help on this. But I actually do think that this one is pretty easy to explain from a young Earth perspective. And I will also remind you of my slide over here that includes fossil wood as something that has been tested and had to found carbon-14 in it. So not millions of years old. But anyway, thank you for watching, everybody. And I actually, Nathan, I'm sorry I got so upset with you at the beginning. I mean, toward the middle when I got mad about you interrupting, because I was interrupting you just as much. So sorry about that.
Oh, that's okay. I just sensed your frustration. You had so many slides you needed to get through, but I wasn't really in agreement with the basic premise. So,
Well, that's because you're just wrong. And if what you were saying was a good rebuttal, certainly somebody else would have thought of it and written it down. But, I mean, I think, you are correct that carbon-14 dating isn't supposed to be used on things that are supposed to be millions of years old. But remember, that's like circular reasoning. If we're already assuming that these things are millions of years old, then how can we actually find out the date, right? And if we discount carbon-14 dating as one of the methods, then we should have a better reason to do that than just, oh, because it doesn't fit our preconceived notion about the age of this item, right? So if there's another date that conflicts, like a real date, like a dating method that says this item is actually this old, then that might be a better reason, right? If we have two conflicting dates, but we have a conflict, we have this data from carbon-14, right? So shouldn't we have be basing our objection on data rather than our idea about the millions of years?
I'm not sure there was a real question there anywhere.
No, I'm asking you what's your data that allows you to reject the carbon-14 proposal of less than 100,000 years?
Of less than 100,000 years.
I'm saying you're saying these items are millions of years old. So
Yes.
do you actually have a dating, some data that tells you it would be millions of years old?
Well, I think that, I mean, I used one recently on the seamount. That was what, iron 60 or something. So there are other elements that have longer half lives that you can try and use on some of these things. But for deep age, I think that just the light of the universe is a pretty good one. We had a discussion of that at the beginning, but anyway, the fact that there is light that is reaching us from seemingly billions, or at least millions of light years away in the Andromeda galaxy or wherever, seems to indicate that the universe is much older than 5,000 years.
So you're using starlight to date coal.
I'm using starlight to say that I think that that's a good reason for the universe to be old. And then once you know the universe is old, then you can start trying to work out how old is the Earth and how old are animals and how old are blah, blah, blah. And I think carbon dating is useful for a certain period of time, but not billions of years.
Okay. Well, that's all for tonight. Thank you, everybody, for watching, and we'll hope to see you next week. God bless you.